Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And also good afternoon to some people in other time zones. We're so excited to have everyone here. I am joining from Boulder, Colorado. It's a beautiful sunny day today, so hopefully you guys are having a good day as well, wherever you're joining from. We're going to take a second just to give everyone some time to settle in and join. So bear with me as we kind of wait here. While we do that, I want to thank our sponsors. First, Parker Freeze Dry. They are sponsoring the wonderful content today and going to walk us through the whole animal, the whole story using freeze drying to cut waste and build trust. Very excited to have them today. Also want to thank our partners over at WPA for sponsoring our webinar series this year. We couldn't do it without you both. I also want to take this time to introduce myself. I am Lauren Rosenmayer. I am a Sustainable Business Account Manager here at the Pet Sustainability Coalition, and I'm so excited to be hosting this webinar with you all today. It looks like we have a good amount of people joining in, so we're going to go ahead and get started. In case some of you are new here, the Pet Sustainability Coalition, or PSC for short, is your sustainability partner for the pet industry. We help over 200 companies navigate their sustainability journey, and we do this through guidance and tools and ultimately building a community in the industry around sustainability. I am lucky enough to be a part of such a passionate team working to make our industry more sustainable. So whether you're a retailer, brand, distributor, supplier, or anything else in the supply chain, we are so welcome to have you. We are a global organization and we realize that the issues we're trying to solve cannot be solved alone. So we thank you all for being here and being a part of the solution. Before we jump into the webinar content, we want to take a second for some announcements and upcoming events. Somehow, just around the corner is the Pet Summit in about 10 days in Orlando, Florida. If you're going to be there, we're so excited to see you. And if you're still thinking of coming, tickets are still available. We do have member discounts as well. So please reach out to us at membersupport@petsustainability.org if you're interested in learning more. Then the days right after that, we'll still be in Orlando for Global Pet Expo, hosting 2 happy hours at our booth. So come see us at the Sustainability Pavilion in the center, at the heart of it all, and join us for drinks and networking. Then in a little bit in April, we hope to see you all at Pet Food Forum. We are hosting a axe throwing networking party. So stretch those arms, stop by, and we're gonna have a lot of fun. And then lastly, we have to give out a save the date. PSC is hosting our flagship networking and educational event here in Boulder, Colorado, November 9th through 11th. A lot of exciting news and keynote speakers coming out now around that event. So we hope to see you all there. And of course, if you have any questions, always reach out to us or visit our website to learn more. So some quick Zoom housekeeping to make sure everyone's on the same page. That chat feature you see at the bottom of your screen, please use that to say hello and introduce yourself. We'd love to see who is here because we can't see each other because we're virtual and know where you're calling in from. Please also use that react button as you see fit throughout the organization or throughout the presentation. We are virtual and cannot see you again, so we'd love to see those reactions, and it's a great way to engage with your speaker today. And then lastly, please use that Q&A tab there at the end for all of your questions. If they go in the chat, we may miss them, so make sure all the questions go there so we can answer those at the end of the presentation today. All right, now getting into the fun stuff. We're going to set some context before I pass it off to our wonderful speaker today and talk really quickly about what is freeze drying. So to put it very simply, and I bet Jerad will have a lot more context to come, freeze drying is the process of dehydrating and removing moisture from a product while preserving its structure, shape, and quality. So some quick steps of how it works. First, the product is frozen, which locks in the structure and all the moisture as ice. Then that product is placed into a vacuum environment and the surrounding pressure is then reduced. Then, through a process called sublimation, the water goes directly from a solid into a gas and skips the liquid phase. That water vapor is then captured and removed, leaving the product dry. So at the end of these steps, you have a product that is the original shape, texture, and quality, and can have a really long shelf life without refrigeration. So to go through a little bit of that, I'm going to then pass it off to our wonderful speaker today. So I'd like to introduce Jerad Ducklow. He is currently the Executive Vice President at Parker Freeze Dry and has more than 20 years of experience working with family-owned businesses and supporting mergers and acquisitions. And currently, he's been with Parker for over 6 years now. We're so excited to have him. Earlier in his career, Jerad was also a teacher, which is very exciting. Thank you, Jerad, for doing that. And he enjoys mentoring and helping others learn. Outside of work, he loves supporting his daughters and helping them pursue their dreams. So before I pass it off to Jerad, give him the virtual microphone, we are going to get a quick poll going here to see your what your biggest barrier is to using whole animal or upcycled inputs. So you should see that poll popping up now on your screen. Please take a second to answer that. A lot of answers are coming in fast. It looks like a leading response now is that people are unsure how to best use them. So it's great to see you all here. I hope at the end of the webinar, you're going to walk away with some more answers. Great. Thank you all for selecting. It's definitely a wide spread, which is good to see, but it looks like unsure how to best use them is the leading answer we're seeing today. So that is great. I'll give you guys one more second to get those last minute answers in. Awesome. We'll go ahead and end that poll, and I will pass it off to Jerad.
Thank you, Lauren. I'd also like to um, poll showed up here. I'd like to thank PSC. This is a topic that Parker Freeze Dry team is very excited to talk about. As you would imagine, there are many ways to implement sustainability into the freeze drying process. I think you did a very good job of giving an introduction as to what freeze drying is as well. So today's topics we're going to be covering some of the challenges that we see out there in the pet industry, in particular, how do we reduce some of our waste? Um, we've got different ways that have been historically used, and now we've got ways that we're attempting to do that in um, I would call it a better fashion, and one that actually can be profitable for a lot of people. We like to call it, refer to it as refuse to revenue. Um, the real question comes down to how do we define sustainability in freeze drying? I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and then provide an easy way to validate some of the products through the freeze drying process. Some of the trends out there that we're observing with various customers and share some of those, maybe share some more popular ones and maybe some less popular ones, and then helping to create the industry and benefit those uh, various types of approaches to the freeze drying process as a whole. So why why does this matter now? We've got a lot of different things that are going into the pet industry as a whole. Um, a lot of different approaches that are coming in. The historical kibble was definitely had the lead and the stronghold on the industry for pet food really up until COVID. And I like to share the story uh, that was shared with me by one of our customers, and they really had referred to an era of COVID was really when we saw a lot of pet owners, pet parents had some time. Maybe that was the first time they had a pup. I would refer to them as the COVID pup. They had a bunch of time to research what should I feed this pup, And next thing you know, they started to realize that maybe the nutritional value in the kibble wasn't there. And what were the alternatives? And freeze drying really took off at that point in time. Um, so we saw a huge growth just coming right out of COVID. On the human consumption side on freeze drying, there was quite a bit. On the pet food, there was not. There was a need for co-packers, so we saw that growth. Um, as we came out of that and saw that growth, we started to find different opportunities. How do we take some of these products that were otherwise waste and turn them into value? Maybe you had to pay some of these processors, and it went all the way down to the local butcher. They were paying to get rid of some of these products, and we were able to assist them to essentially turn that around and sell it as a treat. Obviously the bones and everything you saw, in retail stores previously, but this was a different way of taking maybe some of those tendons and make chewy treats and different things of that nature, as well as organs and so forth. Um, I will tell you that it's pretty important on the transparency side, as we said, when people had a lot of time to Google that and look through it to identify what is the product that my pup is getting. When we talked about sustainability and becoming a part of PSC, one of the comments that was presented to me, and it was a valid concern, was we use a significant amount of electricity in our process, in the freeze drying process. And as we went through and determined, hey, how does that come into play in terms of sustainability? Um, you know, yes, we use a significant amount of electricity. However, the amount of uh, lack of waste on the food side that we're able to do, we can take those remnants that would otherwise go into a plant or into a rendering facility and take that and turn that into something that's valuable that would be either a treat or a food for a pet. Amber, if you could go back to slide 4. Thank you. Um, so position freeze drying, um, it's a tool. It's one of many that are used. Obviously, we talk about kibble a lot. We talk about air drying, different types of. Uh, um, Actually, go back one more slide if you would, Amber. Okay. I think we're one more slide, Amber. There we go. Thank you. So the different types of methods that we talked about, the air dried, the kibble, the frozen, and now you're seeing it shipped directly to customers as frozen. And why are we looking at freeze drying as one of the best options? Obviously, we're retaining the nutritional value, and we create significant shelf life, and we limit the amount of weight that our product is. Sometimes that's challenging on the sales side of it. However, it is still it creates a product that if you start out with 10 pounds, yes, you may only have 2 pounds of product to sell. However, it's still going to have the same nutritional value that 10-pound product would otherwise have. And sometimes that is a challenge for us in terms of selling on the retail side of it. However, again, customers are becoming significantly more accepting of that concept. The different types of formats, whether it be a treat, as I've referred to a couple different times already, a full meal type of product, or just a topper. And maybe in some cases, that's just trying to add some vitamins into that pet's diet that they are lacking. And we can get those from some of these byproducts that are not currently or typically used for those types of applications. Um, Honestly, in some cases, the pet industry is ahead of the human consumption side of things. Um, on that, we're able to utilize significantly more of uh, the products that are grown for human consumption. On the pet side, we utilize more than the human consumption side does. And we'll get into that a little bit more later on in terms of, what is the carbon footprint? We talk about sustainability. What are the things that are occurring out there that maybe creates more of a carbon footprint, and freeze drying can help assist with that. If we go to the next slide, Amber. So one of the internal struggles is how do we define the sustainability application within freeze drying, as I talked about a little bit before about the electrical consumption and so forth. And in fact, we've participated in a couple of different panels and workshops. I guess one of my first ones when the topic of sustainability showed up was at Kansas State University. They've got a couple of workshops there that we attend annually, and they had a panel of a handful of individuals that were either in the industry, were professors, leaders in the industry, and they talked about sustainability and what is it truly in the pet food industry. And this was approximately 4 or 5 years ago. At that point in time, it was very challenging for them to define what that actually was. The ultimate definition, sadly, came back to when I put that on my pet food bag, I can sell it for a higher price. Um, so we were obviously working through that process. Um, then when went to another workshop a couple of years ago at the University of Nebraska, the Lincoln location, at that presentation, uh, they really started to define it a little bit better. In particular, they talked about the ability to do more with less and really focused around the uh, human consumption food waste concept. And they theorized that somewhere between 30 and 40% of the carbon footprint created, at least in America, but probably on a global level, was based upon food waste. And it seems like an extremely high number. But when you stop to think about whether the product expires on your shelves or in your refrigerator, or whether I always like to go back to the apple harvest season. When you think about it, it's an extremely large amount of product that is coming out at a short period of time. There's certain amount of those apples that hit the ground and are never consumed. If we could find a way to freeze them and then ultimately freeze dry them, we would certainly be able to do more with less. So, from that aspect, we started to see the definition of sustainability and the efforts that freeze drying can provide to that. Um, Adversely, in the pet food side, obviously renderings have been a big topic for years, and it's certainly the source of the majority of kibble that is out there. There is some concern that, hey, if we go away from kibble too fast and too hard, too fast, what will happen with the renderings that are otherwise utilized? Um, I think that this is not going to ever occur that fast. The time and evolution that has been going on here over the last 4 or 5 years certainly would not suggest that that is going to happen overnight. And there are other ways that we can, before it gets to the rendering plant and sits in those areas for a period of time, and ultimately becomes pathogen heavy, if we can find ways to mitigate the pathogen growth for a period of time and then freeze dry it and give it that shelf life of 20 to 25 years, again, we're doing more with less. Obviously, um, the trade-offs that come into the process of sustainability, usually, typically, it means that it's going to cost a little bit more. And that's where we're finding, in particular on the freeze drying market, what are people willing to pay for? Quite frankly, everybody wants to have a sustainable product and they want to go down that path. However, there is a amount of cost that will limit what they're willing to do there. Amber, if we could go on to the next slide, please. So when we're talking whole animal uh, and upcycled products, um, it's whether it's beef, whether it's pork, chicken, turkey, we're seeing a lot of it out there in different ways. Um, you know, we've also seen it in fish, and we've seen some of the harmful invasive species that have been harvested under grants, and with the idea that there's significant amount of protein in there, and then they freeze dry it, they grind it up. Now you have a way of adding that to other types of whole products. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we've witnessed the local butchers have been very successful with some of our dryers, and they've got products that they otherwise are paying to get rid of. And again, it's a lot of um, tendons and ears and different things of that nature. The picture on here, this is a duck head. Um, Prior to freeze drying, I don't believe that I had witnessed that as a treat for pets, for pups in particular. However, we've got some customers that are doing these by the thousands. So, kind of an interesting topic there. Amber, if we could go on to the next one. So as you saw in the last picture, um, the duck heads is certainly an underused part. We're talking with turkey heads. We're talking the esophagus, turkey esophagus. We're obviously the various organs are very high in nutritional value. And in a lot of cases, those are simply diced up and freeze dried and made into treats. I'm also seeing some of that on the human consumption side. And I only throw that out there. I know this is more of a pet industry based discussion. However, in a lot of cases, those groups out there in the pet industry are trying to market the fact that they are human consumption capable. And so we're seeing some of that. And some of the biggest processing plants are going to they essentially are building a smaller facility for freeze drying right next door. And whether it's the trimmings, the organs, the bones, the connective tissue, all of those things, they have value afterwards. As you can see in this picture, it's actually freeze dried blood. Again, another topper. It's one that creates uh, it's extremely attractive for dogs in particular, and if you've got one that has a that is struggling to eat correctly, a lot of times that has um, been a good additive for them. Um, when we talk about suitability and the safety and the quality and the palatability, all these different things that are listed on there, everybody has to go through and create their own their own process, their own SOP, um, and it varies greatly. Capturing blood is a challenging process. And in the slaughtering plants, that is not something that they are designed to do. But uh, you will be able to find a couple out there that will do it again because they do not have to pay to get rid of that blood. Instead, they're being paid for it. So it is certainly something that is attractive to those processors. Amber, if we could go on to the next slide. Um, Upcycling, obviously, it means different things to different people. The single ingredient organ treats are probably the most popular that we see out there, whether you find it in Costco, you find it on your local retailer, pet food retailer shelf. You're seeing that quite a bit. And again, it's a rather easy process from a recipe development on freeze drying. It's not really complicated. If somebody wanted to try that and see that that was possible, you could easily just go buy a tabletop harvest right and go through the process and understand how to make that. Um, we are also seeing things, we're tending to focus here a lot on proteins, but we're also seeing additives such as carrots, sweet potatoes, and when you talk about the meal mixers and so forth, again, this is another opportunity for us to take quote unquote seconds that human consumption is not using. Maybe it's the end of the carrot, or maybe it's sweet potatoes that are close to expiration, and they are dicing these up and including them with protein, and then pelletizing it into something that can be fed to the pets for a full meal. Um, you know, I do think that what we're starting to see, and obviously kibble has ruled for a long period of time. Um, you know, I think there's probably the the freeze dried only concept. It's either you have kibble or you have freeze dried. And I think what we're starting to see out there from some of the larger brands is you're starting to see kibble encapsulated in some freeze dried product. It's kind of an interesting time. I don't know how that's going to play itself out. It's really just a way of trying to mitigate the significant jump in the sale price, the retail price on that. But we will see how that plays out. Obviously, it's giving more nutritional value than just basic kibble would, but definitely something to watch out there and look for. Um, Amber, can we go to the next one, please? All right, so where does sustainability play into maybe unforeseen factors? Obviously, when you're taking products from the slaughterhouse, that's a pretty easy one to understand. Obviously, within the logistic efficiencies that are out there, it becomes gives you it's certainly measurable and credible from you know reduction in fuel cost, reduction in weight, and you've just got different opportunities that maybe you didn't otherwise see. And especially like in terms of storage, you no longer have to have the uh, refrigerated chiller area for those that are doing some of the quote unquote fresh products, or even just some of the frozen that is shipped directly to customers. I know there are some larger groups out there that are in that industry that are currently looking to do some of the freeze dried concepts as well. Um, the shelf life is something that probably gave credibility to freeze drying. You're able to, assuming that you can package correctly, you can get 20 to 25 years of shelf life. And obviously, you not only have to package correctly, but the product going in there, you have to be careful with some of the fats and so forth, and oxidization, and your recipe has to make sense and be conducive to be able to get that kind of shelf life. But when you've got that, in addition to the nutritional value, and in some of these other things that we're talking about, um, in terms of uh, utilizing those less used products, you definitely have something that is m- you're able to create a model on. And what I mean by that is you can create a business model that is sustainable and works. And um, maybe not the right choice of terms there. It's a business model that functions and allows you to grow and expand. And really, that's what we do is we provide larger units that allow people to scale um, in the freeze drying industry because it is a niche industry, and it's certainly growing and quickly becoming larger than that. Um, Amber, if we could go to the next slide, please. So, what kind of impact does freeze drying in general have on not only sustainability, but the carbon footprint and just the overall pet food market? Um, you know, we need to get away from the concept of that I talked about earlier when the definition of, well, what is sustainability? We need to get away from it. Well, we can charge more for that. We need to focus on what we're really giving the benefits of the customers. As I mentioned earlier, um, customers, everybody would sign up for this if it was the same price as they could buy their less nutritional, cheaper versions for. There's no doubt in my mind that would be the case, and in fact, we would revolutionize the industry. However, it is more costly, and it's coming down. However, it cannot come down fast enough. And we need to focus more on what is the value add that we're giving, whether it be from a um, uh, economy basis, ecological basis, pricing basis. What are these different things? Nutritional basis for the pet. Uh, what are we really selling when we talk about the additional sustainability efforts that we're putting in there for that? And I think, we've got some different topics here for every group out there marketing those aspects. It's going to have a little different approach to it. However, there are some basic ones here, and if you're interested and ever have any questions, I know Matt had mentioned in the chat that he's on this chat. He's with me at Parker Freeze Dry. Myself, I'm available to answer some of those questions. But definitely some different avenues to focus on, but really you need to put the focus around the fact that, hey, we're doing more with less. We're able to benefit and give you a better product. Um, that's the overall value pitch that I would focus on. And we do from our equipment sales side of things. Um, Amber, if we could go to the next one. So we talked a little bit about transparency before. Uh, what's in it, where to come from, why it matters. Anybody that's involved in sales or building a brand, you're really just trying to build trust with those customers. And sadly, um, we're seeing some of that. uh, deteriorate, from the cycle of the term sustainability, at least within the pet food industry. In the beginning, as I mentioned 5 or 6 years ago, the inability to really define it, and I would have argued at that point in time it was more of a marketing term, just because we weren't able to define it. However, that has evolved, and the definition is becoming clearer every day. In that same token, what you're starting to see is uh, groups are challenging retailers that are saying they're sustainable, that they've got these different efforts out there. You're seeing some of these groups that maybe the product um, isn't what it said it is or says it is on the container. Maybe the efforts behind the scenes aren't uh, clearly described anywhere. Um, Again, it's struggling to build the trust. Now, what you're starting to see as well through that evolution is you're going to see regulations come out that are going to try to define what that term means and what you can say. If you want to use that term, this is what you have to do. Um, as many of us know, the term organic kind of went through that similar type evolution. We're seeing that, and it's good. It's healthy. It's not a term that should be thrown around lightly. There are certainly significant benefits to everybody if we can manage those types of things. Um, Amber, if we go to the next slide, thank you. So all of that transparency, we've got different studies out there. The one nice thing about being in the freeze drying industry is we see everything from soup to nuts. I think I had mentioned an invasive species fish that showed up in some of the lakes in the Midwest, and then they were harvesting them and then grinding them up for the protein and using them in various places. That's a very unique situation. Quite honestly, I look at those duck heads and again, it's something that very people would realize that is a whole treat. But so you're because we see all of these different things, there are many aspects that go into ensuring that these are suitable for the intended use. And we also work with a lot of customers that struggle with their local um, inspectors. In many cases, that it varies with um, who is what level is the inspector, and whether you're cottage law, whether you're starting to get larger, all the way up to USDA, FDA. We work with them all. Um, it's very important that you have your product defined. Um, yes, we have benefits over here on the sustainability side, but make sure that you have your product designed correctly, tested, you've validated it, and then you're recording that information. We've spent an extensive amount of time on our equipment trying to ensure that the traceability is available for the customers that want it and ultimately need it. And quite frankly, that's all of our customers as they scale up. So, um, we have opportunities to we've presented our customers with opportunities to store that information for really as long as they want to store that. Um, but also with connections to different groups to validate the process and in most cases for us, we're the equipment supplier. We don't know everything, but we certainly know the people, the players in the community, and we're able to connect groups with those in the pro as the process progresses and you begin to scale up your overall freeze drying um, efforts, so to speak. Amber, if we go to the next one, talked a little bit about this already. Um, you know, there are claims out there, and again, it's starting to provide where people are starting to provide uh, proof that maybe some of the claims are not as accurate as they would like them to be, and they're debunking these claims, and it's becoming pretty harmful to some of the larger groups. So make sure that you've got the specific language, what we just talked about previously, the validated process, and that transparency that the customers are ultimately looking for. Next slide, please, Amber. All right. Um, you know, we have the joy and the benefit of working with uh, a large number of processors at various levels. And in fact, when I first started working with Parker 6, 7 years ago, um, w- we actually met a lot with Harvest Right, the tabletop unit, and we got to know them very well. We have a very good relationship with them, and really just trying to understand the process. Hey, we what are the different roles out there and stages of growth? Obviously, we're a larger scalable piece of equipment. Um, but I guess what I'm really getting at is, we need to see some of these smaller entrepreneurs to push these products and come up with these ideas. That's what makes our market economy work. And those entrepreneurs are going to push those products. They're going to start to gain some traction. They're going to do it on a smaller level. And typically they can get to a certain size. Um, and and usually funding becomes a struggle as they scale. And we, in most cases, see either some sort of private equity venture capital group come in and essentially help them get over the hump, so to speak, and really go. In our case, maybe it's something that does 500 pounds a day to next thing you know, they want to do 5,000 or even 15,000 pounds a day of these products. And then once it becomes scalable there, sadly, now that's when you see some of the larger manufacturers come in and assist with that process. The good thing about the larger manufacturers is that they do have a sustainability focus, and it is a process that allows them to be able to be a part of that overall industry, the sustainability industry, and or sustainability efforts, so to speak. So, but those larger manufacturers then come in and a lot of times will acquire, and it will become a bigger part of their overall portfolio. We've witnessed that on a number of different occasions, not necessarily on the very large end yet, but certainly in that mid-sized end with the private equity venture capital groups coming in. So again, all of those groups do have some form of sustainability effort, and they understand the value add that it has as a whole, and that freeze drying can contribute to that. Uh, Lauren, I think I've talked more than enough on this. If you want to open it up to questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jared. That was wonderful. I really enjoyed how you talked about some of the history of freeze drying and then brought it back to the current industry trends we're seeing. And it was really great hearing you also talk about those trade-offs so openly and honestly. It's some of the really good considerations companies should be thinking about when considering freeze drying for their portfolio. Yeah, thinking about the energy use of the packaging versus the longer shelf life, waste reduction is a really great story. And then also that cold chain resilience, reliance, avoiding that is really great as well. And then my favorite part, obviously, is all the duck heads and the feet and the chicken feet. My puppy loves all of that stuff. So it's really great to see that there is a waste reduction story along with that as well. So thank you very much. That was a great presentation.
Thank you.
So please continue to throw your questions in the Q&A section if you have any more. I'll get started with what we have so far, though. So our first question is there a type of product or format that works best for freeze drying, or is it truly suitable for all animal products or byproducts?
Some freeze dry better than others, obviously, and I would say those that give us the biggest challenge would be the products that are extremely contain high levels of fat. Fats and oils do not typically freeze dry very well. Kind of back to your early description of freeze drying, Lauren, and you did a really good job of simplifying that. But what we're really trying to extract is the water. And if you have oil and water doesn't mix, fats and water really doesn't mix. So that they are a little more challenging than others, but lean whole products typically are can be freeze dried very easily.
That makes sense. Thank you. Another question we have is, are preservatives and antioxidants necessary in freeze-dried products?
Well, they're not necessary. Again, each person with their own recipe, they're going to have to go through and determine the ultimate answer and goal is they are not necessary. Um, However, I'm not going to say that everybody is able to avoid them with their freeze drying process because um, sadly there are efforts out there sometimes that just because we process a product in a freeze dryer, it has this tremendous amount of shelf life and retains the nutritional value, and we're not going to see any degradation because we have good packaging, and that's simply not the case. It's a product by product investigation and validation.
Awesome, thank you. We have another question pop in. Do you see a possibility for freeze dry as a raw material in pet food rather than a direct consumer product?
Could you repeat that one, please?
Yes, I think trying to get after if freeze dried will be more of a raw material in the food rather than a treat or something going direct to consumer.
I believe that we're already starting to see that. Um, and again, as the scalability and we start to see more and more, and it ultimately it's a price factor. It's a pricing factor that will drive that down once we have that come into a level that's much closer to what they're currently seeing. We will see that overtake it. I would agree. I mean,
Awesome.
at the end of the day, right now, we're seeing the frozen and the term raw. Um, and keep in mind, we are good friends and work very closely with the kibble producers too. So we know everybody in the industry. And one of the things probably 4 or 5 years ago, they pulled us aside and said, "Hey, um, we know that freeze drying is growing, and you guys, your group can do a lot of different things with the products that we're otherwise just grinding up and running through extrusion process. But tell us how do we get there too and make this a better process?" So.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. We have another question kind of related to earlier when we were talking about trade-offs, and you talked about the packaging formats. So with that in mind, can you talk a little bit more about the packaging and shelf life? We've had some people read about Mylar bags and how they can keep the products safe the longest. Do you have any experience on what packaging is recommended or any experience around compostable packaging and if that is a possibility?
Well, one thing I've learned early on in my career, Lauren, is stay in my lane. So I'm understanding the freeze drying process and the equipment, especially the scalable equipment. However, on the packaging side of it, um, I do not know as much, and I certainly do not want to recommend something. I know people who do, and again, that's really the approach, not only that I take, but my team. I encourage them is, hey, don't try to go through and suggest something that's going to cause somebody harm. Let's connect them with people that actually understand that process.
Absolutely. Thank you for your honesty there. One question that I am really excited about too is hearing what are some of the most interesting product formats you're seeing brands develop in freeze drying ingredients? What are some exciting new ingredients that people are starting to freeze dry?
Well, a year ago, I would have said duck heads and turkey feet, and again, whenever you can find something that was otherwise wasteful, now, and I don't know if it's so much about products because we've seen and witnessed so many different things. Um, but what I am really encouraged about is um, we're seeing some of these bigger slaughtering plants that are actually coming to the conclusion that I should have a freeze drying facility right next door. I shouldn't be shipping this across the country. I shouldn't be. It should come out because, quite frankly, what was happening in the past is all of that was thrown on a truck. It was taken to an area. In some cases, it was sitting outside for periods of time. The pathogen growth was exponential. Um, And now they're saying we can take it right from that plant right to the processing, and the pathogens are at a level that are acceptable. The log reduction is not as necessary, and so we can get there faster and better. So it's I'm not going to lie. Tomorrow I'll be shocked. There'll be a new product that somebody hasn't thought of that comes up. But right now, it's been the pet food industry in particular has been really really entrepreneurial in their efforts to come up with new ideas to get their products, their pups and their cats and pets in general better products. We see a lot in um, uh, just all sorts of different things. So it's
Yeah,
fun.
it's great to see how freeze drying can open that door to using the whole animal as we're here to talk about
Hmm.
today. So it'll be interesting to see what other parts of animals we see coming down the line. Yeah.
Yeah, and one other thing that we've got a couple groups out there doing it for birds in particular, the grubs and the worms, and there's a lot of discussion in the pet industry on insect proteins and so forth, and to feed the birds those live products, there's even some snakes and reptiles and things that we're doing some
Ooh,
products that they like the freeze drying process not only for the shelf life, but it comes out looking exactly like it did when it was running around. So kind of interesting.
that's very interesting. I've never thought about that aspect before, so that's really
Mhm.
cool. Awesome. Well, I think that's all the questions we had today. Thank you, Jared, so much for joining us and everyone at Parker for putting this content together. It was great to hear more about freeze drying. Please do not hesitate to reach out if you have any questions to Jared or myself. We're here, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Lauren.
Have a good one.